Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. It was supposed to be an ordinary evening. Sarah stood outside the upscale bar, the wind biting at her skin as the hum of traffic filled the air. The city around her was alive, bustling with the usual mix of people, cars, and lights. But to Sarah it all felt distant, almost surreal, as if she were watching it through a fogged window. Her breath came out in visible puffs, the cold air stinging her cheeks. She wasn't sure what she was doing there, but she had made up her mind. Tonight, she would make him feel what he made her feel. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she glanced down at it. A message from Emily, her best friend, popped up. "You sure about this? It's risky." Sarah stared at the words for a moment, her fingers trembling slightly. She thought about texting back, telling Emily she was crazy for even thinking of going through with it. But no, she was done doubting herself. She had been quiet for too long, hiding her feelings while he lived in his world, untouched by the consequences of his actions. A year ago, her world had been shattered when Mark, the man she'd been dating for 2 years, left her without a word, no warning, no explanation. He'd just disappeared, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her broken heart. But that wasn't the worst part. Mark's betrayal wasn't just about the relationship. It was the humiliation, the way he discarded her without any regard, the way he moved on to someone new, as if she had never mattered. And all the while, he pretended that nothing was wrong. She was nothing but an afterthought to him. The anger had consumed her for months, festering like a wound that refused to heal. There had been days when she'd wanted to pick up the phone, call him, scream at him, or even beg him to come back. But no, that wasn't going to happen. She wasn't going to be the broken-hearted woman waiting for a man who couldn't care less. And so, tonight, she had decided. Enough was enough. She looked up at the entrance to the bar, where people in expensive clothes milled around, chatting and laughing. He was inside. She knew it. She had heard through mutual friends that Mark had been coming here frequently, and tonight he would be here again. She took a deep breath and walked towards the door. Her heart raced, but she pushed through it. This was her moment. She had to make him see the consequences of what he had done to her. The moment she stepped inside, she scanned the room, her eyes quickly locating him in the corner, seated at a table, surrounded by a group of his friends. He looked the same, as always, tall, well-groomed, his confident smirk plastered on his face as if nothing in the world could touch him. But to Sarah, he was a stranger, a man she once knew, but whose actions had transformed into a betrayal so deep she could no longer recognize the person sitting before her. She stood there for a moment, watching him, her fingers clenched into fists by her sides. The weight of everything she had felt, the loneliness, the betrayal, the pain, crashed down on her all at once. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was revenge, the kind that burned hot in her chest, a fire that demanded to be released. Then her eyes fell on the man sitting next to Mark. He was tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that looked like it had been tousled by the wind. His clothes were sharp, expensive, a black suit that probably cost more than she made in a month. But it wasn't his appearance that caught her attention. It was the way he seemed so out of place, as though he didn't belong in a place like this. His eyes scanned the room, as if he was looking for something, or perhaps someone. The instant their eyes met, Sarah felt a jolt of recognition, though she couldn't place why. There was something about him, a presence, a force that made her pulse quicken. He looked at her for a second longer than necessary, his gaze intense, almost knowing. But then, just as quickly, he turned his attention back to Mark and the conversation. A plan began to form in her mind. She didn't know why she was doing this, but it felt right. Everything about this moment felt like fate. She had no idea who this man was. He could be anyone. But for the first time in a long time, Sarah didn't care. He was a means to an end, and tonight he would play his part. She made her way to the bar and ordered a drink, her eyes still on Mark and his friends. The man's gaze flickered back to her, and she felt the weight of it, as though he had been watching her all along. Sarah steadied her breathing. She could do this. She was going to make sure Mark understood. The moment she had been waiting for arrived. Mark stood up, excusing himself from the table. Sarah knew this was her chance. She quickly walked toward him, her heart pounding in her chest. He didn't see her until she was almost right in front of him. When he finally turned around, his expression shifted from casual amusement to a look of surprise. Before he could speak, she acted on pure instinct. Without thinking, she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of love or even of passion. It was quick, harsh, and full of bitterness. A kiss that held everything she had been feeling for the past year. The anger, the humiliation, the pain. It was a kiss of revenge, meant to sting, to remind him of what he had done. But as their lips met, something unexpected happened. Mark's eyes widened in shock, and before she could pull away, he grabbed her wrist. It was the man she had seen earlier, the one seated next to Mark. His grip was firm, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "Get off her," he commanded, his voice cold and commanding. The moment was over, but it left Sarah feeling more vulnerable than she had ever felt before. Mark was standing there, speechless, his eyes darting between her and the man who had just intervened. The man held her gaze for a long moment, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt a flicker of something she couldn't explain. It wasn't just the rush of adrenaline or the lingering bitterness of revenge. It was something deeper, something mysterious. As the man's eyes locked onto hers, she wondered if this was the moment her life was about to change forever. But what she didn't know was that this kiss, this impulsive, reckless act, was about to lead her into a world she could never have imagined, a world where nothing was as it seemed, and everything she thought she knew about herself, Mark, and even the man who had stopped her, would be turned upside down. Sarah's pulse was still racing from the kiss. She could feel her heart hammering in her chest as she pulled away from Mark's bewildered stare, her mind still reeling from the sudden, reckless action. She had done it. She had kissed him, the man who had betrayed her. The taste of bitterness lingered on her lips, and yet, as she stood there, she didn't feel the satisfaction she had expected. There was no rush of triumph, no sweet revenge. Instead, an uncomfortable silence filled the air. The man, this stranger, was still holding her wrist, his grip tight and firm. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she noticed how intense his gaze was. It wasn't just an ordinary look. It was something more, something almost knowing. It made her feel as though he could see right through her, as if he understood her in a way no one else ever had. "Let go of me," she said, her voice sharp, trying to break the tension. Her chest was tight, her hands trembling slightly. She had to get away from here, from all of it. But the man didn't move. He didn't loosen his grip on her wrist. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying her with an almost unsettling calmness. "You sure you want to go?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Yet there was something in it, a hint of challenge, like he knew this wasn't just some random encounter. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had kissed Mark to make him feel what she had felt, to show him the consequences of his actions. But now it seemed like this stranger was part of a much bigger picture. He had intervened at the most unexpected moment, and his presence, his calm, unnerving presence, was something she couldn't ignore. She pulled her wrist away from his grasp, feeling the heat of his fingers lingering on her skin as she did. "I don't know who you are, but stay out of this." His eyes followed her movements, never leaving her face. "You seem like you've been through hell," he said, his tone almost sympathetic. But it's not over, is it? For a moment, Sarah wasn't sure how to respond. She had been dealing with Mark's betrayal for so long, trying to piece together the shards of her life. But this man, who was he? Why did he care? She wanted to walk away. She wanted to forget this whole night and go back to the life she had before. But as she looked into the man's eyes, something stopped her. There was something familiar about him, something that gnawed at the edge of her memory. She couldn't quite place it, but it was there, buried beneath the surface. She took a step back, the distance between them growing, but he didn't let her off the hook. Instead, he followed her with his gaze, his expression unreadable. "You're running from something," he said softly, his words cutting through the chaos in her mind. "And you think this is going to fix it?" Her jaw tightened. She didn't want to admit it, but he was right. She had been running from the pain, the heartbreak, and the anger. She had been trying to outrun the truth, the reality of what Mark had done to her, the way he had discarded her like a broken toy. But she wasn't ready to face it yet. Not now. "I'm not running," she snapped, her voice harder than she intended. "I just want to leave." The man's lips quirked slightly, almost as if he were amused by her resistance. "You think walking away is going to solve anything? You think you can just erase what happened?" She froze. His words hit too close to home. She had tried to erase it. She had tried to bury it all beneath layers of anger and revenge, pretending that it didn't matter. But it did matter, and deep down she knew it wasn't over. "I don't need to explain myself to you," Sarah said, her voice cold. "Just stay out of my way." But the man didn't back off. Instead, he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "I don't think you understand what's happening here. What you're doing. It's not just about revenge. It's about something much bigger." Sarah stared at him, confusion clouding her thoughts. What was he talking about? Her whole life had been about revenge, about making Mark feel the same pain she had endured. But now this man was telling her it was bigger than that. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why do you care?" The man finally took a step back, giving her space. He didn't answer her question right away, instead turning to look at Mark, who was still standing frozen, his face pale from the shock of everything that had just happened. "I'm just someone who knows how the game is played," he said, his voice low. "But if you're asking who I am, my name is Gabriel." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Gabriel. The name echoed in her mind, but again she couldn't place it. She had heard it somewhere before, but the memory was just out of reach. Gabriel turned his gaze back to Sarah, his expression softening just slightly. "You're not the only one carrying pain, you know. We all have our battles to fight, but running from it, pretending it doesn't exist, only makes it worse." Sarah felt a surge of frustration. She didn't want a lecture. She didn't need this man telling her what she already knew. She needed to fix things. She needed to make Mark pay for what he had done. But as she looked at Gabriel, something shifted inside her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of curiosity. Who was this man? Why was he here? And why did he seem to know exactly what to say to make her question everything? "Look, I didn't ask for your help," Sarah said, turning away from him, her voice shaky but determined. "I just want to be left alone." But Gabriel wasn't finished. "This isn't over, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying a weight of warning. "You're about to uncover things about Mark, about yourself, that you're not ready to face." She stopped in her tracks, her back to him. His words hung in the air, their meaning sinking in slowly, like cold water. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling with both fear and curiosity. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to confront the things she had buried deep within her soul. Gabriel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to Mark, his gaze hardening. "You've been hiding something, haven't you? Something Sarah doesn't know." Mark shifted uncomfortably, his face flushed with guilt. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What was he hiding? And why was Gabriel so sure of it? The tension in the room was thick, and Sarah could barely breathe. She had come here tonight for answers, for closure. But now the truth was slipping through her fingers, just out of reach. "Mark," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What aren't you telling me?" But Mark remained silent. Gabriel stepped forward again, his eyes locked on Sarah's. "You'll find out soon enough. The truth always comes out." And with that he turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing there, more confused and shaken than ever before. Sarah stood motionless, her heart still pounding from the words that had just been spoken. Gabriel's cryptic remark echoed in her mind. The truth always comes out. What truth? What was he talking about? Mark, still frozen and utterly silent, seemed to shrink into himself. His usual confidence had vanished, replaced by an unsettling discomfort. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she tried to make sense of the situation. Gabriel had left, but the weight of his words remained, hanging in the air like a thick fog. What wasn't Mark telling me? Her mind raced. She wanted answers. Wanted them now, but Mark, of course, was no help. The silence between them grew, and with it, the tension in the room became unbearable. "Mark," Sarah said, her voice a harsh whisper, "what's going on? What aren't you telling me?" Mark opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it again. He looked around the bar as though he were searching for an escape, but there was no escape. Not from the truth. Not from what had happened between them. "Sarah," he said, his voice hoarse, "this isn't the time. Please, not here." But Sarah wasn't about to let him off that easily. She had suffered too long, carrying the weight of their broken relationship and the betrayal that had come with it. The anger she had once harbored when she had kissed him in an act of revenge was quickly giving way to something much darker. Fear. What was he hiding? "I don't care about the time or place," Sarah replied, her voice trembling with frustration. "What's going on, Mark? You've been keeping something from me, something big. Gabriel knew it, didn't he? What is it?" Mark hesitated, his eyes flickering nervously. He seemed torn between saying something and keeping quiet. Finally he spoke, his words slow and deliberate, as though he had to choose them carefully. I didn't want you to know, but I guess it doesn't matter anymore. You'll find out soon enough anyway." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Was he about to confess? She leaned in closer, her breath quickening. "What is it, Mark?" He ran, a hand through his hair, then let out a deep sigh. "It's not just about us, Sarah. It never was. There's something else you need to understand. Something more complicated." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had expected an explanation, something concrete, but this was different. Her instincts told her that this wasn't just some misunderstanding. This was the beginning of something much bigger. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Just tell me, please." Mark finally met her gaze, his eyes dark and filled with a mixture of regret and something else, something she couldn't place. He opened his mouth to speak again, but just then, the door to the bar swung open and a group of people entered, laughing and chatting. Sarah's attention snapped away from Mark, and in that instant, she saw someone who immediately caught her. It was Gabriel. He was standing just inside the doorway, his gaze locked on her. For a moment, everything else faded away. The noise of the bar, the people talking, the laughter, none of it mattered. All she could see was him. Gabriel stepped further into the bar, his presence commanding attention. He walked over to where Sarah and Mark were standing, his movements smooth, confident, like a man who had always been in control of his environment. There was something unsettling about the way he carried himself, as if he had an agenda, something that had yet to reveal itself. Sarah's eyes shifted back to Mark. She could see the way his face tightened when Gabriel approached, and for the first time, she realized just how connected these two men were. Mark's voice broke the silence. "What do you want, Gabriel?" Gabriel didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned his attention to Sarah, studying her with a look that seemed to read her soul. Sarah felt a flicker of unease at the intensity of his gaze. It was as if he could see right through her, as if he knew everything she had been through, every secret she had buried. "Sarah," he said softly, his voice low and calm, "you have no idea what you're involved in, do you?" Sarah's stomach tightened. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. This wasn't just about a broken relationship anymore. There was something much darker at play. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel stepped closer. To her, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not here to hurt you, but you need to know the truth. Everything is connected. The past, the present, and what's coming next. It's all part of something much bigger than any of us." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. Every word he spoke seemed like a riddle, every sentence laced with mystery. She had come here to confront Mark, to get the closure she'd been desperate for, but now she wasn't so sure. Mark's voice interrupted her thoughts, raw and desperate. "Stop it, Gabriel. You don't know what you're saying." Gabriel didn't even look at him. His focus remained solely on Sarah. "You should listen to him, Mark," Gabriel said, his tone cutting like a knife. "You've been running from this for too long, but the truth doesn't stay hidden forever." Sarah turned to Mark, confusion flooding her mind. What truth? Her pulse quickened and she could feel the panic creeping in. Everything she had thought she understood was crumbling. "Mark," she began, but her voice faltered. "What's going on?" Mark's face contorted with emotion. He took a step toward her, but Gabriel placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. The gesture was calm, but there was a palpable force behind it. "I didn't want you to get involved in this, Sarah," Mark finally said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted you to know, but now I can't stop it. I can't protect you anymore." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. "Protect her? From what?" "Mark, please," Sarah pleaded, her voice shaking. "What are you talking about?" Mark looked around the room as though searching for some way out, but there was no escape. He had to face this. She had to face this. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you don't understand. The reason I left, it wasn't because of you. It wasn't because I didn't care. It's because of him." He gestured toward Gabriel. For the first time, Sarah felt a jolt of true fear. The connection between these two men was deeper than she could have imagined. But what was the connection? What was Gabriel to Mark, and why had he played such a pivotal role in her life tonight? "I don't know who you think you are, Gabriel," Mark continued, his voice trembling now. "But I won't let you destroy her." Gabriel's expression didn't change. "You're already too late, Mark," he said calmly. "The damage is already done. She's already a part of this world now. There's no turning back." The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. The mystery that had been brewing since Sarah walked into this bar was now consuming her completely. She had thought it was about betrayal. She had thought it was about revenge. But now it was something much, much darker. Sarah looked between the two men. Both of them were hiding something. Both of them were playing a dangerous game, and Sarah, she had just become a pawn in it. The air felt thicker now, heavier. As Sarah stood at the center of a storm she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Mark and Gabriel were at odds, their silent war simmering between them. For the first time, Sarah was fully aware of just how entangled she had become in their web of lies, betrayal, and secrets. Mark was shaking. His usual calm demeanor had been replaced by visible distress, and Sarah's heart twisted as she watched him. She had loved him once, had trusted him, but that man, the one who had walked away from her, was not standing before her now. This man was broken, vulnerable, and desperate. "I never wanted you to be part of this, Sarah," Mark said, his voice strained. He looked down at his hands, clenched into fists by his sides, before slowly meeting her gaze. "I didn't want you to know any of this. Sarah was confused, her mind spinning with 1,000 questions. What is this, Mark? What is it that I don't know? You've kept me in the dark for so long, and now you expect me to just accept whatever this is? Gabriel, who had been standing silently beside them, finally spoke. You're right. To be confused, he said softly. This is bigger than you realize, Sarah. You've only seen the surface of what's really going on. The truth, the real truth, is buried deep, and it's not something that's easily uncovered. Enough. With the riddles, Gabriel, Sarah snapped, her voice sharp. Just tell me what the hell is going on. Gabriel glanced at her, his eyes calm but piercing. I'm telling you, Sarah. You need to prepare yourself for what's to come. You've walked into a world you don't understand. Sarah felt a cold chill creep up her spine. She looked between Mark and Gabriel, her mind racing. What are you talking about? I didn't ask for any of this. I came here to confront Mark, to get answers, and now I'm standing here with more questions than ever. Mark stepped forward, his face pale, the weight of the moment clearly overwhelming him. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he murmured, more to himself than to her. I should have told you, but I couldn't. I couldn't drag you into this. Not after everything we've been through. Sarah's pulse quickened. What are you talking about, Mark? She demanded. What are you hiding from me? Mark swallowed hard, his gaze darting between her and Gabriel. Sarah, there's something you need to understand. Something I should have told you long before now. Gabriel turned his head slightly, his voice cold but filled with a quiet authority. Now's not the time for hesitation, Mark. She's already in this, whether she wants to be or not. Sarah's mind reeled. She wasn't sure who to trust anymore or what was real. Mark had hurt her, but there was something about the way Gabriel spoke, so confidently, so assured, that made her feel like the ground was slipping out from under her. Mark seemed to deflate, his shoulders sagging with a deep sigh. It's all connected, Sarah. Everything. You, me, Gabriel. It's all connected. I'm not following, Sarah said, her voice trembling. What do you mean? Gabriel stepped forward, his presence looming like a shadow over her. You're more involved in this than you realize, he said, his voice low and steady. But it's not just about Mark's betrayal. It's about something much bigger. Sarah was becoming frustrated. This was all so cryptic. She had come here for clarity, for closure, but all she was getting were more riddles, more half-truths. The only thing she was sure of now was that everything she had believed about her relationship with Mark had been a lie. And Gabriel, he was somehow tied to it all. But how? Tell me what you know about me, Gabriel, Sarah said, her voice rising with a mix of anger and fear. What aren't you telling me? Gabriel's lips curled into a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. You've been living in a bubble, Sarah. Your world has been small, safe, but now it's about to shatter. What you think you know, what you've always believed, is nothing more than a veil. You need to take that veil off and see things for what they really are. She felt her stomach tighten. The words he spoke made her feel as if she were standing on the edge of something, teetering between the life she had known and some dark, unknown reality. What had she been missing all these years, and why had Mark hidden all of this from her? Mark, Sarah said, her voice quiet now. You said it was all connected. What does that mean? What's going on between you and Gabriel? Mark looked down, his voice barely a whisper. I never wanted you to get hurt, Sarah, but Gabriel, he's part of a world you don't understand, a world that's dangerous, a world that I've been trying to escape for years. Sarah's breath hitched. Escape from what? Mark was silent for a long time, as though struggling with the weight of his words. Finally he spoke, his voice heavy with guilt. Gabriel and we've been part of something illegal, something that I got caught up in. And I didn't want you to know because you deserved better than that. But it's too late now. It's all out in the open. Sarah's mind reeled. She felt like the room was spinning, like the ground beneath her was slipping away. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. Gabriel took a step forward, his eyes locked on Sarah. "You've been a pawn in this game, Sarah. From the moment Mark walked away, from the moment you kissed him in the bar, you became a part of something much larger than you can imagine." "No," Sarah breathed, her hands trembling. "No, this can't be happening." Mark looked at her with a pained expression, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't want you to get caught up in this, but now you're involved and there's no turning back." The words felt like a punch to the gut. Sarah had never asked for any of this. She had simply wanted answers, closure. But now the life she had built, the life she had known, was crumbling before her eyes. And the man standing before her, Mark, was part of something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. "So what now?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. "What do I do now?" Gabriel finally spoke, his voice firm and resolute. "Now, Sarah, you have to decide which side you're on." The tension in the room was unbearable. Sarah's mind was a swirl of confusion, fear, and disbelief. Just moments ago, she had been confronting Mark, desperate for answers, only to be pulled deeper into a world she hadn't even known existed. And now, Gabriel, this enigmatic figure who had been hovering around the edges of her life, was telling her that her involvement in all of this was no accident. It was too late to turn back. "Which side you're on," Gabriel had said, his voice steady but laced with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. What did he mean by that? Side? There were no sides for Sarah. There was just the truth. She had never wanted any part of this world. She had just wanted to move on, to forget about the pain, the betrayal, and the heartbreak. But now that was impossible. Mark stood by silently, his face drawn and pale, his shoulders slumped in defeat. It was clear that he, too, was grappling with the weight of what was unfolding. This wasn't just about their relationship anymore. This was something much bigger. "Mark," Sarah said, her voice trembling, "what have you gotten me into?" Mark looked at her, his eyes full of regret and guilt. "I never wanted you to be part of this, Sarah," he said quietly, "but you are now. You're involved whether you want to be or not." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. Involved. The word echoed in her mind, and she suddenly felt like she was drowning in it. She had tried to stay out of this. She had tried to heal and move on, but it seemed that fate had other plans. Her whole life, her sense of security, her understanding of the world was unraveling before her. "But why?" Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you warn me?" Mark's eyes filled with sorrow, but he didn't have an answer. He had kept the truth from her for so long, buried beneath layers of lies and half-truths, and now she was here, caught in a situation she didn't fully understand, with no way out. "I couldn't," Mark finally said, his voice barely audible. "I thought I could protect you, but I was wrong." Gabriel stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Sarah's. "It's too late to protect you now. You're already too deep in this." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. "Tell me the truth, Gabriel. Tell me what's really going on." Gabriel's eyes softened just slightly, and for a brief moment Sarah saw something human behind the coldness. He wasn't just the mysterious, calculating man she had first encountered. There was a vulnerability in his gaze, something that hinted at a past full of secrets. "The truth," Gabriel said, his voice low, "is that this isn't just about Mark. It's about a world you don't know. A world of power, manipulation, and corruption. Mark got pulled into it, and so did I. But now you're involved. Whether you like it or not." Sarah could feel the weight of his words, pressing down on her chest like a heavy stone. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "What world?" Gabriel exhaled sharply, as though weighing whether to say more. "A world of organized crime," he said, his voice quiet. A world of people who operate in the shadows, pulling the strings that control everything. Politics, business, even families. Everything is connected. Sarah recoiled. No, this can't be true. But Gabriel wasn't finished. It's true, Sarah, and you've been part of it without even knowing. You've been a pawn in a game that's been going on for years. Mark's face was ashen as he looked at Sarah, his eyes full of sorrow. I never wanted you to be a part of this, but now you are, and it's my fault. I got involved with the wrong people, and I dragged you into it. The room felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of their words. Sarah wanted to scream, to run away, to escape the nightmare that was unfolding in front of her, but she couldn't. She couldn't escape the truth. So what now? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Gabriel looked at her, his expression unreadable. You have a choice, Sarah. You can walk away, pretend this isn't happening, and try to go back to your life. But that's not going to work. You're already too deep in, or you can face the truth and help us take them down. Take who down? Sarah asked, the words barely escaping her lips. Gabriel's gaze hardened, his jaw tightening. The people who've been running everything from the shadows. The people who pulled the strings and made sure Mark and I stayed in line. Sarah's head was spinning. How could this be real? Her world had always been simple: work, friends, family. She had never imagined that there was something bigger, darker, lurking beneath the surface of everything she knew. I don't understand, she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. What do you want from me? Gabriel's eyes softened just a fraction. We need your help, Sarah. You're the one they'll never see coming. You're the one who can get close to them, get the information we need. Sarah took a step back, her mind racing. Me? Why me? Because you've been invisible, Gabriel said simply. No one suspects you. You've been living your life under the radar, and that's exactly what we need. You're the perfect person to infiltrate their world. Mark nodded in agreement, his face full of regret. I never wanted this for you, Sarah, but you're our only chance. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. You're asking me to get involved in something I don't understand, something dangerous. I'm not a part of this world. Gabriel's expression remained firm. But you are now. Whether you want to be or not, the choice is yours, Sarah. You can walk away and ignore it, but that won't change the fact that they'll come after you. Or you can help us take them down. Silence stretched out between them, and Sarah's mind swirled with fear, confusion, and anger. She had never wanted this. She had never asked for any of this, but now it was impossible to ignore. Her life had been turned upside down in the span of a single night. The man she had loved, Mark, was part of something dark and dangerous. And Gabriel seemed to be the key to unraveling the whole mess. But what would happen if she took that step? If she agreed to help them, to dive deeper into this world that had been hidden from her for so long? What happens if I refuse? She asked quietly, her voice hoarse. Gabriel didn't hesitate. If you refuse, they'll come after you. You'll become a target. There's no way out unless you help us. Sarah's eyes widened with shock. You're saying I have no choice? You have a choice, Gabriel said, his voice calm but firm. But it's not a good one. You can either fight back or you can let them win. Sarah felt the weight of his words, the gravity of the situation pressing down on her like a mountain. The truth was clear now. She was already too deep and there was no going back. But could she really do this? Could she really help take down an entire network of people who were capable of anything? She felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. She had always prided herself on making her own choices, living her life on her own terms. But now, her choices were limited to impossible options. I'll help you, she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. But I need to know everything. I can't do this without knowing what I'm getting myself into. Gabriel's lips curled into a small, approving smile. That's all we need to hear. The next few days passed in a blur. Sarah had made the choice. She had agreed to help Gabriel, to take down the shadowy figures that had held Mark and Gabriel captive for years. And yet, despite her decision, despite knowing that there was no turning back, a part of her still felt detached, like she was living in someone else's story. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She had wanted a normal life, a life free from secrets, from the kind of dangerous world that Mark and Gabriel were entrenched in. But now she was part of it. Whether she liked it or not, she had learned quickly that there was no easy way out. Gabriel had briefed her on the basics. The organization they were up against was vast, stretching across borders and influencing everything from business deals to political movements. They were ruthless, dangerous, and determined to protect their empire at any cost. The only way to bring them down, Gabriel had said, was to infiltrate their ranks, gather evidence, and expose them for what they were. It sounded simple enough, in theory. But Sarah knew it wasn't. She had no idea how deep this went, how much risk she was taking, and every time she thought she understood the stakes, Gabriel would remind her that she was only seeing the tip of the iceberg. The nights were the hardest. As Sarah lay in bed, her thoughts would race. She would stare at the ceiling, her mind unable to shut off. What had she gotten herself into? It was too late to go back now. The decision had been made. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, she wondered if she had made the right choice. The door to her apartment creaked open one evening, breaking her train of thought. Sarah sat up in bed, instantly alert, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't heard anyone approach, no footsteps, nothing. But now, there he was, Mark, standing in the doorway. "Mark," Sarah breathed, her voice a mix of surprise and fear. "What are you doing here?" Mark's face was tired, haunted. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale and drawn. He hadn't been himself for days, ever since they had agreed to work together. And now, as Sarah looked at him, she couldn't help but feel that he was slipping further and further away. "I couldn't stay away," he said, his voice low. "Sarah, I'm sorry for everything. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have never dragged you into this." Sarah got out of bed, her emotions a whirl of confusion. "You don't get it, Mark. You didn't just drag me into this. I chose this. I chose to help you, both of you, but I don't know what to believe anymore." Mark took a step toward her, his expression pleading. "I know, but that's the problem. You're too involved now. It's not just about taking down the organization. It's about protecting you. And I can't do that anymore. I'm too far gone." Sarah shook her head, trying to push the rising panic out of her chest. "What are you saying? That we just give up? That I can't help you?" Mark's gaze fell. "There's a target on your back now, Sarah. They're already watching you. We thought we had more time, but we don't. It's too dangerous. I don't want you to get hurt." For a moment, everything around Sarah seemed to blur. She felt dizzy, disoriented. They were watching her. The weight of those words hung in the air like a thick fog. She had known there would be consequences, but now it felt real. The danger was no longer something distant, something she could ignore. It was here. It was right in front of her. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What do we do now?" He reached out, taking her hand in his grip tight. "We have to finish this. We have to take them down before they get to you. But we can't do it alone. We need to act fast." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing ahead. Act fast. That was the key. She had no choice but to trust Gabriel, even though she didn't fully understand the depths of the organization they were up against. She had to help them. She had to see this through. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't just about Mark and his betrayal. It was about something bigger, something that could change the world, and if she didn't act now, she would lose everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Gabriel had orchestrated their plan carefully, leaving nothing to chance. There were meetings with shady contacts, encrypted messages exchanged in dark corners of the city, and a lot of high stakes. Decision-making. Sarah felt like she was living in a movie, a spy thriller, one that she never asked to star in. But as much as she tried to keep her emotions in check, as much as she tried to convince herself that this was just another mission, the weight of what was at stake began to wear her down. Every decision felt like it could mean life or death. And every moment she spent with Mark and Gabriel, she became more aware of how far they had fallen. There was no innocence left. There was no turning back. On the final night of their operation, everything came to a head. The plan had been set. They were going to infiltrate a high-profile event, a gala, where the top members of the organization would be gathered. It was the perfect opportunity to gather intel, to get close to the key players. It was risky, but it was their only shot. Sarah stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the dress Gabriel had provided for her. It was black, sleek, elegant. She barely recognized herself. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman who had changed, in ways she hadn't anticipated. "You'll be fine," Gabriel's voice cut through the silence. He was standing in the doorway, dressed in a sharp suit, his expression unreadable. "Just stick to the plan, and everything will go smoothly." Sarah nodded, though a tight knot had formed in her stomach. "What if it doesn't?" Gabriel's eyes softened just for a moment. "We don't have a choice, Sarah. This is it. If we don't do this now, we never will." She met his gaze, then looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly, but she forced herself to breathe. This was it. There was no turning back. The gala was everything Sarah had imagined it to be, luxurious, opulent, and full of people whose names she had only heard in passing. Business moguls, politicians, celebrities, all of them walking around like they owned the world. But Sarah wasn't here to enjoy the glitz and glamour. She was here to gather information, to bring down the people who had been pulling the strings from the shadows. She moved through the crowd, her heart racing as she kept her eyes on the target, one of the key figures in the organization, a man named Victor Delacroix. He was one of the most powerful men in the room, and his connections ran deep. Sarah approached him cautiously, using all the training Gabriel had given her. She smiled, keeping her expression neutral, her voice calm and steady as she introduced herself. Victor's eyes scanned her for a moment, then he smiled. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Carter. It's rare to see someone so interesting at a gathering like this." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The conversation was going exactly as planned, but she knew better than to get too comfortable. This wasn't about charm. This was about survival. As the night wore on, Sarah got closer to the heart of the operation. She had gathered the information they needed. Everything was falling into place, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She turned to make her way back to Gabriel and Mark, but before she could take a step, someone grabbed her arm. "You've done well, Ms. Carter." Victor's voice came from behind her. "But I'm afraid it's time for you to leave." The end.